Start us off, what is a carbon border adjustment mechanism? It's a mechanism implemented by governments to account for the carbon cost of producing imported goods with the ultimate goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and supporting global progress towards net zero. And so, as most of you will be aware, countries like the EU, jurisdictions like the EU and the UK have put in internal carbon taxes, either through the form of cap and trade schemes like the emission trading scheme, or countries like Singapore and states like California have put in carbon taxes. And so they're a cost that is layered on goods that are produced domestically. And the purpose of a carbon border adjustment mechanism is to kind of level the playing field between domestic products that are subject to these taxes and imports which are not. Just as a quick reminder, the Greenhouse Gas Protocol defines net zero as when we have achieved a balance between human-caused greenhouse gas emissions and their removal from the atmosphere over a specified period with defined boundaries. And that defined boundaries piece is quite critical to CBAM, because what CBAM is doing is it's extending those defined boundaries. So governments set policies that create a business case to reduce emissions within their own jurisdiction's boundary. And CBAM is an attempt to extend that beyond those boundaries. In general, under all carbon border adjustment mechanisms, it's the importer that is liable, and the importer must report the type, quantity, and country of origin of each in-scope good imported. So CBAMs don't apply to every single imported good, and we'll come on to that a little bit later. They must also report the total embodied emissions in the imported good and any carbon price paid in the country of origin. They must then pay the difference in the price between the carbon price paid in the country of origin and what they would have paid to produce that material domestically. And it's really that idea of leveling the playing field between imported goods and domestic goods. Embodied carbon, as it's referred to in the UK legislation, or embedded, as it's referred to in the EU legislation, but those terms are really quite interchangeable for our purposes today, is a sum of the direct emissions from production. So if you're smelting iron ore, for example, you'll be burning coke, which is a fossil fuel, and that will have direct emissions associated with it. Any indirect emissions from production, so that's electricity or possibly purchased steam or heat used in the production. So in our example of steel production, for example, you might have coke as the direct emission from the blast furnace, but then you might be using electricity to cut and package the steel, and that would all count as the indirect emission. And then, interestingly, the direct and indirect emissions from any in-scope precursors, and this is something that I advise people to look at quite carefully. You might not be trading in a CBAM in-scope good, but you might be trading in its precursor. And an important example under both the UK and EU regimes is ammonia. So fertilizer is an in-scope product under both regimes, and under both regimes, ammonia is considered an in-scope precursor. So if you're importing or exporting ammonia, it's really important to make sure that you're CBAM ready.